There is a moment avoidants never see coming. Not when you love them, not when you show up for them, not when you hold space for all the things they refuse to face. No, the moment that shakes their entire world is the moment you stop trying, the moment your energy pulls back, the moment your presence goes quiet, the moment your heart steps out of the room without saying a word. Because empath energy isn't loud, it's felt. And when it leaves, they feel that louder than anything you ever said. They never expected you to be the one who walks away. Because to them, you were the steady one, the safe one, the emotionally available one, who made connection feel warm instead of suffocating. Avoidance panic without ever showing it. They fear closeness, but they fear losing it even more. And with you, they got used to being emotionally fed without having to feed back. Your empathy was their emotional oxygen, and they inhaled it like it would always be there. They didn't notice how much you carried, how much you translated, how much you understood. Without being told, you felt their moods, their shifts, their silence, their distance, their fear, their triggers. You adjusted yourself constantly to keep the connection alive, not because you were weak, but because you saw their wounds before they ever admitted them. You saw the child in them who feared abandonment. You saw the adult in them who protected that child by avoiding anything real. You didn't shame them for it. You didn't overwhelm them. You didn't force them to open up. You simply offered love in the most gentle, non-demanding way, and they thought you'd never stop. But empaths don't withdraw quickly. They withdraw quietly, slowly, softly, after giving chance, after chance, after chance. Empaths try, then they overtry, then they break inside from trying too much. And that's when the shift happens. The shift avoidants never see coming. The shift where your energy detaches, not out of anger, but out of exhaustion. You stop explaining. You stop soothing. You stop filling in the blanks. They refuse to speak. You stop being the emotional anchor that held the whole connection together. You don't slam the door. You simply stop holding it open. And that is when avoidants fall apart. Because avoidants don't understand how deeply they depended on the very connection they kept at arm's length. Your energy made them feel safe, calm, wanted, chosen, understood. But they only realized it was you, creating that safety when you walked away from it. See, avoidants don't panic when you get close. They panic when you stop trying, when your warmth disappears, when your empathy stops flowing, when your emotional presence goes missing. Because without your connection, they're forced to sit with what they've been avoiding, their own unhealed wounds, their own emotional hunger, their own suppressed feelings for you. Avoidants don't crumble because you left. They crumble because suddenly they feel everything they spent months suppressing. Your silence hits their body like an emotional withdrawal, like something vital has been unplugged. Because it has. You were the emotional regulator they never admitted they needed. And when you step back, not in punishment, but in self-protection, something inside them snaps. Their old defense mechanisms stop working. Their distractions feel empty. Their distance feels like abandonment instead of safety. They don't know how to handle that. Because here's the secret. Avoidants don't avoid love. They avoid the mirror. That love holds up, and your love was the clearest mirror they ever looked into. You showed them how much they wanted connection while they were pretending they didn't care. You showed them how deeply they longed to be understood while they acted unaffected. You showed them their emotional walls weren't protecting them. They were starving them. You awakened feelings they didn't know how to process. You triggered wounds they didn't know how to heal. You touched parts of them they swore no one would ever see. So when you withdraw your energy, they lose their emotional compass. They lose the softness they only felt with you. They lose the calm you brought into their chaos. They lose the emotional clarity your presence provided. And suddenly they're left alone with everything they ran from: the fear of losing you, the regret of pushing you away, the awareness that they were loved by someone rare. Empaths don't just love, they transform. And avoidants fall apart, not because you abandoned them, but because you stopped abandoning yourself. You didn't disappear. You didn't punish. You didn't play games. You simply reclaimed your energy. And that is the moment they finally realize they weren't afraid of you. They were afraid of how much they felt for you. And now they feel it louder than ever. They never expected you to stop trying. They never thought your patience had an ending. Avoidants rely on one silent assumption: you'll always be there. You'll always understand. You'll always hold space. You'll always forgive. You'll always come closer when they pull away. But the day you finally took a breath and stepped back, something shifted inside them, so sharply it rattled their core. Because avoidants aren't afraid of losing you, they're afraid of needing you. And the moment your energy pulls back, their fear flips. Suddenly, they're not running from closeness. They're terrified of the emptiness your absence creates. Avoidants don't fall apart when you're loving them. They fall apart when your love is no longer there to stabilize the chaos inside them. Because your presence was their safety, even if they never said it. Your emotional clarity, your warmth, your consistency, your intuition, your ability to hold space when they were overwhelmed. All of it was grounding them in ways they didn't understand until you stepped back. And when an empath withdraws, it's not loud, it's not dramatic, it's not punishing, it's quiet, it's calm, it's final. And that silence, that softness, that emotional detachment, it shakes an avoidant more than any argument ever could, because they've always believed connection disappears in chaos. They don't know what to do when connection disappears. In peace, they expected tears. They expected you to chase. They expected your heart to fight for them, even when they shut down. But empaths don't chase forever. Empaths don't beg to be understood forever. Empaths don't carry the whole relationship on their back with no reciprocity forever. At some point, even the most loving soul gets tired of pouring into a cup that refuses to hold anything. And when the pouring stops, the avoidant feels it immediately. They don't break down in front of you. They won't show it. They won't confess it. But internally, it's a collapse. Because for the first time, they're forced to sit with everything your presence used to numb. Avoidants use distance as a coping mechanism. They retreat to feel in control. They pull away to maintain emotional safety. But when you pull away, it destroys the narrative they've used for years to protect themselves. Because suddenly, they're not the one controlling the distance. They're not the one calling the emotional shots. They're not the one deciding the pace. And this is where avoidants silently unravel. They expected your love to be unconditional. They never imagined it could be withdrawn. You weren't just a person they kept at a distance. You were their emotional anchor. Even from afar, they knew you'd be there. When they needed you, they knew you understood their patterns. They knew you'd soothe their fears instead of judging them. But when an empath detaches, avoidance feels something they've avoided for years. Loss, not imagined loss, not theoretical loss, not fear of intimacy loss, real loss, the kind they can't reframe as you being too much, the kind they can't blame on timing or stress or distance, the kind that forces them to admit they cared far more than they ever said. And the reason avoidance fall apart quietly when you withdraw is simple. Your energy was regulating them, even when they ignored your texts, even when they pretended to be unaffected, even when they acted distant, even when they pushed you away. You were the emotional stability they used without ever acknowledging. You were the safe place they didn't know how to enter, but didn't want to lose. You were the emotional intelligence they benefited from while pretending they didn't need it. And when that disappears, their internal world becomes too loud to handle. The thoughts, the regrets, the flashbacks, the what ifs, the memories of how deeply you cared, with no agenda. Suddenly, they're not escaping you. They're escaping themselves. Because now, they have no one to project onto, no one to blame, no one to push away, no one to test, no one to measure safety with, no one to emotionally hover around without committing. And that leaves them face to face with their own patterns. Avoidance collapse because your absence forces them to confront everything. Your presence softened. Your withdrawal makes them feel what their own avoidance has been trying to suppress. Your silence mirrors the silence inside them. Your distance exposes the emotional distance they've spent years denying. Your detachment forces them to admit that they were more attached than they ever let on. This is why avoidants don't process love in real time. They process it when it's gone. They don't feel the connection when you offer it. They feel it when they've lost access to it. And when the empath withdraws, it creates a void nothing else can fill. Not distractions, not rebound connections, not temporary attention, not work, not routine, not emotional numbness. Because an empath's energy isn't casual. It leaves a mark, a pull, a magnetism, a grounding, a softness that stays in the air long after the empath leaves. Avoidants don't break down because you walked away. They break down because they can feel the moment. Your heart stops reaching for them. That's the moment their defenses become their prison. That's the moment their silence turns into suffering. That's the moment they finally understand that you weren't the one who was overwhelming. Their unhealed parts were, and now they have no shield between themselves and the truth. Avoidants fall apart, not because you withdrew love, but because they realize you were the safest love they ever had, and they didn't know how to accept it until it was gone. When an avoidant feels an empath pull back, something shifts inside them that they never admit out loud. Because an empath withdrawing isn't loud, it isn't dramatic, it doesn't come with warnings or ultimatums or final speeches. It comes quietly, and quiet is what avoidants fear the most, because quiet leaves them alone with themselves, and themselves is the one place they've been running from their whole life. When you withdraw your energy, you force them to sit in the one space they never learned how to survive, their own emotions. And suddenly, the things they pushed away start crawling up the walls of their mind. The feelings they tried to bury, the memories they tried to escape, the guilt they never resolved, the longing they pretended they didn't feel. Your silence turns all of that into a storm, because while you were giving, they could hide. behind distance, behind avoidance, behind there I'm fine, behind there I don't need anyone. Your presence gave them cover, but your absence removes every shield. Avoidants don't fall apart because you left. They fall apart because without your emotional warmth, their inner world becomes unbearable. They don't know how to regulate without someone else's calm. They don't know how to feel safe without someone else's softness. They don't know how to connect without someone else reaching first. You were their regulator, even when you didn't realize it. Your presence was the emotional capacity they didn't have, and when you stop offering it, their system panics, not because they don't care, but because they were using your love to avoid dealing with their wounds. And now, with nothing to lean on, they start to unravel. They replay your conversations, not the surface ones, the ones where you saw through them, the moments they felt exposed in a way that felt both terrifying and comforting. They remember the way you listened, the way you stayed calm, when they shut down, the way you understood what they didn't have words for. And suddenly, they realize something they never wanted to face. You weren't just someone. You were the one person who made them feel like home without demanding anything in return. But avoidance don't process this with clarity. They process with chaos. Their mind races. Their chest tightens. They pace. They distract. They shut down. They scroll. They drink. They detach. They avoid the places you used to touch their heart. Because the moment an empath withdraws, the avoidant loses their emotional anchor. And without that anchor, they drift into everything they've been avoiding: regret, fear, longing, confusion, shame, desire, self-blame. They question themselves. Why did I push them away? Why didn't I try harder? Why does it feel different without them? Why do I miss them when I said I didn't need them? Why can't I stop thinking about them? Why does the silence feel like punishment? Why does distance hurt more than closeness ever did? Why did I feel safer with them than alone? Why do I want to reach out? Why can't I? Avoidants live in contradiction. They want closeness, but they fear what closeness requires. They want connection, but they run from the vulnerability it demands. They want love, but they don't believe they deserve it. You didn't cause that conflict. You simply triggered it by being genuine. And when you take your energy back, that conflict grows louder until it becomes unbearable. This is where their unraveling begins. Not where they lose interest, but where they lose control. Avoidants fall apart when the empath stops pouring, because the empath was never extra. The empath was the balance, the grounding, the softness, the emotional translation of everything they couldn't express. You didn't overwhelm them. You stabilized them. And now that stability is gone, your absence becomes the mirror they can't avoid anymore. It shows them the parts of themselves they've refused to confront, the wounds they carry, the patterns they repeat, the ways they sabotage, the love they reject, the affection they crave, the intimacy they fear, the emotional hunger they pretend they don't feel. And for the first time, they can't blame you for any of it. They can't tell themselves, "You're too much," because now they feel how empty less truly is. They can't tell themselves, "I don't need connection," because now they feel the difference between isolation and peace. They can't tell themselves, "I'm better alone," because now their loneliness doesn't feel like strength. It feels like loss. This is why avoidants fall apart. When the empath withdraws, you don't just leave. You leave them with themselves. And the truth is, their inner world has never been a safe place. Your love softened it. Your presence calmed it. Your energy warmed it. Your consistency grounded it. Without you, they sit in a coldness. They don't know how to survive. When an empath finally pulls back, the avoidant expects relief. But that's never what happens. Not with someone whose presence once softened their world. Not with someone whose energy once made them feel safe, without ever demanding anything in return. Their nervous system has been shaped by distance, but their heart was shaped by you. So when you step back, even quietly, even gently, the shift inside them is immediate. At first, they try to act unaffected. They pretend nothing changed. They follow their usual patterns: distraction, logic, detachment, routine. But nothing works the way it used to, because the absence of your energy isn't empty, it's loud. And avoidants crumble in silence, not in chaos, not in dramatic breakdowns, not in visible emotional explosions. No, they fall apart in the quiet moments. They can't escape. In the morning, when they pick up their phone and there's no message from you. In the afternoon, when something reminds them of you and they have no way to share it. At night, when their mind plays memories. Like an involuntary movie, avoidants don't lose people loudly. They lose them silently, slowly, painfully, piece by piece. Every day without your presence chips away at the walls they swore would protect them. Every moment they don't hear from you makes them aware of how much they depended on your emotional stability. Your absence exposes something they never wanted to face. They needed you, not for survival, not for validation, not for ego, but for grounding. Your love regulated their nervous system in ways they couldn't articulate. Your empathy softened their trauma responses in ways they never understood. Your presence made connection feel safe for the first time in their life. And when that presence disappears, their internal structure collapses. Avoidants fall apart when the empath withdraws, not because they lose attention, but because they lose their emotional anchor. They don't know how to exist without someone who loves without fear. They don't know how to fill the space you once filled effortlessly. So they try to distract themselves. They try to appear unaffected. They bury themselves in work, in tasks, in logic, in silence. But nothing numbs what your absence activates. Because you weren't just there. You were the one person who made connection feel possible. Your love was safety. Your patience was oxygen. Your presence was home. And when home stops being accessible, they feel the displacement instantly. Avoidance may run from closeness, but they also starve for it. And you were one of the rare people who fed that hunger without judgment. That's why your withdrawal hurts them more than anything else. You're not punishing them. You're protecting your energy. You're reclaiming yourself. You're choosing your peace. And ironically, that's what shakes them awake. Because for the first time, they're confronted with a reality they can't avoid. You won't overextend anymore. You won't chase anymore. You won't absorb their wounds anymore. You won't carry the connection alone. This is the moment. Avoidants realize they miscalculated you. They thought your love was infinite. They thought your patience had no bottom. They thought your heart would always stay open, no matter how far they withdrew. But now, their distance has a price, and losing you isn't something they know how to recover from. Avoidants don't miss you in waves. They miss you in permanence. It's not temporary longing. It's a deep, aching recognition that what they pushed away was the very thing their soul needed most. They fall apart, not because you left, but because they finally understand what your presence meant. Your withdrawal forces them to face everything they avoided. their fears, their patterns, their wounds, their emotional immaturity. And for an avoidant, that kind of self-confrontation feels like emotional freefall. But here's the part. Most empaths don't realize. You're stepping back isn't the end of the story. It's the beginning of their awakening. Your absence teaches them what your presence couldn't. That connection requires effort. That love requires courage. That distance creates pain, not safety. And whether they reach out or not, whether they return or not, whether they admit it or not, your withdrawal changes them. It forces them to grow, to face themselves, to reckon with the heart they try to keep locked away. Some avoidants come back, ready to try. Some return with humility. Some reach out with vulnerability they've never shown before. Others don't return, not because they don't care, but because the guilt is stronger than their courage. But every avoidant, without exception, feels the shift when an empath disconnects. And you need to understand this. Your absence is not a loss. It's a boundary, a rebalance, a reclaiming of power. You loved deeply. You gave wholeheartedly. You showed up fully. Your withdrawal isn't punishment. It's self-respect. And that's what finally forces them to confront the truth. They didn't lose your presence. They lost access to a version of love that may never come again. If you're watching this, choose yourself, not to hurt them, but to heal you. And if this message hits your heart, remember to like the video, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs this clarity today.